Okay, cool. Okay, well, I'm just going to like dive into this really quick. I'm just going to throw a presentation that we have been given on the screen, so I'll share that and get. So if you've got questions, throw them in the chat, and I can get to them. Jen, if you want to look for the chats, and you can even just say, hey, here's some questions we can address. Happy to do that as we go along. If it pertains to something that we're doing.
Got it.
I mean, we could certainly wait till the end so we can kind of see how it goes with questions. All right, so let's do this thing. All right, can you see that? Can you see my screen, I should say?
We've got it, yep.
Awesome. All right. Okay. All right, so my points today are for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. So what is it? It actually is part of the American Rescue Plan Act, and it became law on March 11 of this year. And it is specifically for restaurants, food and beverage industry, and I'll get into details what all that includes. The program's been appropriated for $28.6 billion, and all the funding will be going through SBA until the appropriations have been expended. So until there is no more. So we definitely want to make sure folks get into the portal and at least into the system. And the nice thing is that you have the availability to use all of your funds for eligible uses no later than March 11 of 2023. So you have almost 2 years to use your funds. All right, so who is eligible? Everything from restaurants, food stands, food trucks, food carts, caterers, your bars, saloons, lounges, taverns, coffee shops, ice cream shops. So we've got a few here that have asterisks by them. It's like bakeries, brew pubs, taprooms, microbreweries, wineries, distilleries, inns. So the thing there is that you need to show that you have on-site sales to the public with at least 33% of your gross receipts. So that's the thing there, is that this is meant for those that do on-site, not necessarily through distributors, or maybe you make it and then you ship it someplace. So it's meant to do on-site to help businesses stay in business to serve the public. So how much are you eligible for? So any individual business can have funding up to $5 million per location, not to exceed $10 million for any businesses that have affiliated businesses. And the minimum award is $1,000. So if your calculations show that it is below 1,000, then you would not be eligible. All right. So how is the RRF different than any of the other programs? So in this particular program, you do not need to be registered in sam.gov, which I believe in the beginning, this was a lot of word that was going around. So no businesses will need to have a DUNS number or cage or anything like that. If you have an EIN, a tax identification number, also ITINs are acceptable as long as they aren't expired. All right, so who is not eligible? So if there is an entity that is a state or local government operated, now I'm going to be saying dates throughout the presentation, and the dates are really important. So businesses that as of March 13 of 2020 that they own or operate with any affiliate businesses more than 20 locations. So that's the cap right there, is you can't have more than 20 locations, regardless of whether those businesses are under the same or different names or in different industries. So If you have a pending application for, or if you did receive a shuttered venues grant. So that is just out now. So if you're thinking about shuttered venues, you cannot apply to RRF because they are both grants. If you're a publicly traded company, if your business is permanently closed. So that's different than if you were closed for 6 months and then you are planning on reopening versus you are permanently closed. If you are a nonprofit, you're not eligible. And then again, going back to if your funding calculates to less than $1,000, not eligible. Okay, so as far as organizations that are eligible, C Corps, S Corp, partnerships, LLCs, self-employed, sole props, independent contractors, tribal businesses, and then if your LLC is taxed as an S Corp or a sole proprietor, so just about any type of an entity. And if you aren't sure, you can always check your taxes as to how you're distinguished that way. And if you have any questions, we have a lot of information that I'll share with you where you can find that for some of those questions. Okay, franchises. So if you're operating as a franchise and you're meeting all of those eligibility requirements, the franchise must be listed on the SBA's franchise directory. So you can certainly, in the application portal of the RRF, you can look up the entity in the franchise directory at that time, but it's best to make sure that it already is. If you have any questions with regards to if your business isn't on there, you can certainly reach out to our franchise department and then check and see what steps you would need to take. Okay, we actually had a lot of businesses unfortunately file for bankruptcy. Now, the nice thing here is that if you are operating under an approved plan of reorganizing under a Chapter 11, Chapter 12, or 13 bankruptcy, then you are eligible for funding, as long as the applicant is. So an applicant is not eligible though, again, going back to permanently closed, if you file Chapter 7 liquidation bankruptcy, or if you file Chapter 7, 11, 12, or 13, and it is not under an approved plan of reorganization. Now, I mentioned earlier about permanently closed. So permanently closed does not include businesses who temporarily close their doors due to state or local restrictions, and you are still in operation or have reopened. So there's been quite a businesses that stayed open and then decided, no, I'm just done. So I'm going to close. So funds cannot be applied for to try to get that business up and going because you actually closed it if you wanted to do something different. Although there may be an opportunity here in a couple slides if it applies. Okay, so we've had lots of other funding programs out there as well, and many have applied to the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Loan. So here's the deal with that is any funds that you have already received through the Paycheck Protection need to be subtracted from the applicant's final funding amount. And it'll calculate that. So you are going to have to find your PPP documents because you'll need a loan number and also the amounts that are on there. So definitely be looking for that information. And the EIN or the Social Security number is going to be the exact same that was used for your PPP when you apply for the RRF. Now, if the applicant received a PPP loan, the applicant must use the same identifier for its RRF application as used in the PPP. So as I just mentioned, now, if you applied for a first draw for multiple locations with the same EIN and subsequently applied for a second draw under a different EIN, then you have to provide the EINs for each entity that received the second draw. And then applying for the RF you must withdraw any outstanding PPP. So you have to have already received the funds. So if you're in the middle of applying and you're going to applying for PPP and you want to apply for RRF, it's best to just withdraw it if it's not going to get funded by the time you apply. And then of course, you can't have any pending applications through the shuttered venues. All right, so there is a section in the application where you'll need to mark that you are certifying that due to the current economic uncertainty makes a funding request necessary to support ongoing or anticipated operations. So that's something that you'll just check on your application, which is the reason why you're applying for funds. All right, fun stuff. What can you use your funds for? Honestly, you can use it for quite a bit of stuff. So business expenses, that is your payroll, and it includes sick leave, utility payments. That is everything for me. Actually, I'm gonna narrow it down for you here. So I'm also pulling up the program guide, which you can look at it offline too on the website. And this is kind of our go-to. So when it comes to business payroll taxes, it's everything from sick leave, healthcare, group healthcare, insurance premiums, utility payments. That includes electricity, gas, water, telephone, internet access, or any other utility that is used in the ordinary course of business for which service began before March 11 of 2021. Business maintenance expenses. So that includes maintenance on walls, floors, deck surfaces, furniture, fixtures, equipment, quite a bit of maintenance expenses. So business supplies, that includes PPE equipment, cleaning supplies, any business supplies that you would use in your day-to-day operations. Covered supplier costs. So it's expenditures made by to a supplier of goods for the supply of goods that are essential to the operation of the business. And business operating expenses. And again, this is insurance, marketing, fees, licensing, legal, your point of sale equipment. So anything that is business related expenses. Trying to find my. And construction costs. Now, this is only for construction of outdoor seating. So if you haven't done any construction for outdoor seating, or if you have, you can actually get that covered. Business rent payments. So that includes rent under a lease agreement. It does not include any prepayment of rent. And also payments on any business mortgage obligation, which includes both principal and interest. And again, does not include any prepayment of principal on a mortgage obligation. And then we have business debt. So this actually covers quite a bit. It includes any business debt that the owner has, everything from credit cards. So anything that's business related, you can use it to even pay your PPP or your EIDL because it's a business debt. So past due expenses are eligible if they were incurred beginning on May 15 of 2020 and ending on March 11 of 2023. So you couldn't pay for something that was beyond 2023. Like if you had an EIDL loan that was 5 years, you can't pay it past that, unless you wanted just to pay the whole thing off. But you can't do like monthly payments beyond. So that is quite a bit that you can use the funds for. Okay, so when do you have to use the funds? So I mentioned earlier that you have until March 11 of 2023. So these funds must be spent on expenses that were incurred between February 15 of 2020 and March 11 of 2023. When do I have to use the funds? So again, continuing. So after the total awarded funds have been exhausted, then what's going to happen is you'll need to provide a report and certify what you use the funds for. Now, we don't quite have those steps in place yet, but beginning December 2021, so this year, you'll be required to provide a self-reported audited data detailing the use of those distributed funds for each year through 2023. So you just have to say what the funds are going to be used for or what they have been used for. So we'll provide guidance, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, which I'd probably say maybe in a couple months, what that reporting will look like. Okay, here's the fun stuff. How to calculate. So the very first one is the easiest. And so if you've been in operation prior to January 1st of 2019, you're going to take 2019 gross receipts minus 2020 gross receipts, and you're going to minus any PPP funds that you received, any idle. So if you receive that $1,000, that gets applied. If you have an idle loan, that gets applied. So these things have to be subtracted from your funding amount. So calculation 2, and this is if you've had partial operations. And I'll explain what operations means too, because there's a difference with that. And this is partial operations through 2019. So you'll take the average 2019 monthly gross receipts times 12 minus 2020 gross receipts, and then minus any PPP, idle, any other funding. And then applicants that began operations partially in 2019 may choose to use calculations 2 or calculations 3. However, the calculations 3 could take longer with processing. So calculation 3, and these are for applicants that began operations on or before January 1 of 2020 and March 10 of 2021. So if you just started your business last year and you have not opened, but you've incurred eligible expenses as of March 11 of 2021, then you can apply. And what you'll need to do is you'll take the amount spent on eligible expenses between February 15 of 2020 and March 11 of 2021, minus 2020 and 2021 gross receipts and any other federal funds that you'd received. And applicants that began operations partially in 2019, again, you can choose to use the calculations 2 or calculations 3. And again, 3 will take a little bit longer because there's more documentation that is going to have to be verified. So just take a look at what that's going to look like. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, what gets excluded, it's your PPP, first draw or the second draw. So if you've got both, then they would both need to be the 11-12 payments. And that was, so SBA had a program where they would take care of your 6 months if you had existing SBA loans. And so that would be that portion there. If you received an EIDL loan, EIDL advance, the targeted EIDL, any other grant funds through the CARES Act. And the state also received federal funds. And if you received any of those funds as business grants. And then the Randolph-Shepard Act financial relief, this is for vending machines. And this also falls under the, I'm going to botch the word, I just looked it up. But it falls under for sight impaired businesses. And I will have to look to see what that term was because I just saw it, but this happens, but this falls with vending machines there. All right, so how do you apply? And I just checked the website just this morning, and if you go to restaurants.sba.gov, the actual, they've got the link up there to watch a video to walk you through the application. And there is also the username and password to register. So that is already up. And you can go through your point of sale vendor. The point of sale vendor is the preferred first method because the point is SBA has contracted with several point of sale vendors to process the gross receipts and also the banking information. So this is going to be your best source. If you're choosing not to, that is totally fine. You can go through the online application on the SBA website. And then there is a third point, which is through a telephone. So if a company or owner does not have access to a computer or has specific questions, there actually is a hotline that is dedicated to helping people with your applications or any questions. Okay, so what documents do you need? So the application, the 3172, completed, initialed, and signed. And this form will be digitally secured in the system. You'll need a 4506T, signed and dated. And this form, it will also be digitally on the platform as well. You'll need gross receipt documentation. So your tax returns. It could be that 1120, the 1120S, a Schedule C. If you've got partnerships, you got the 1065, including your K1s. The bank statements are the three most recent bank statements. You'll also need your financial statements, income statement, profit and loss, and then your point of sale reports. And that includes an IRS form 1099K. And don't worry, these are all on the website, and you don't actually need the copy of these slides because everything is going to be in the program guide on the website. And if you need them, I can easily send them to you, or you can look them up. But that's our go-to, honestly, is that program guide. And I'll pull it up at the end just so you can see where it's at. Okay, additional documents. So for calculations 1 and 2, the application, the 4506, your 2019 gross receipts from your tax returns, and then the 3 most recent bank statements, 3 months worth of recent bank statements, and then your 2020 gross receipts. And so there's listed preferred documentation, and then there's accepted. So focus on the preferred. The accepted may delay processing because there needs to be verification. So the preferred then would be your filed tax returns and your point of sale report. You can submit your financial statements, such as your income statements or profit and loss statements, signed, dated, and certified as to the accuracy by the applicant. And so that will take a little bit longer to process because that needs to be verified. So the preferred documents. So for calculus 3, again, it's the application, 4506, your 3 months most recent bank statements, and your 2020 and 2021 gross receipts, and then comfort letter.
Irene, you're muted.
I had a little connection glitch, so thanks for pointing that out. Hopefully you didn't miss too much. So again, the preferred documentation that so this is for the calculation 3, which is if you started your business last year. So we're just needing additional information. And then the accepted, and these items may delay. So if you can do the preferred, that would be best. And it would push your application through the system a lot faster.
Hey, Irene,
Yes.
we did lose your slideshow and your little glitch.
Aha. Okay, let me try this again. So let me go out. Yeah, I had a little thing pop up that says my connectivity was having issues. So let me try this again.
And then when you get that back up, there is one question on slide 18.
Yeah.
The question just says, excluded is also the idle $10,000 grant received.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Are we back on?
Yes, you're good to go.
Sweet. Yes. So the excluded is the idle grant, the idle loan, the PPP. If you received anything from the state that was part of the CARES Act, because the state also provided funds to businesses. And so that all will be excluded from your funding source. Okay. So as far as continual documents, when it comes to your brew tabs, wineries, distilleries, bakeries, again, going back to that 33% is just documentation showing that you have on-site sales to the public that comprises at least 33% of your gross receipts for 2019. And then for businesses that open in 2020, it is your original business model should have at least 33% of gross receipts on-site sales to the public. So that needs to be addressed as well. And if there's an inn, then inns have, lodging, but then also has the food side. So again, same would apply for an inn as well. So how do you get help with your application? Like I said, there's a hotline specifically. Our office actually is also helping with applications, as well as your Women's Business Center, the Small Business Development Center as well, and then SWOR. So any of our resource partners can help you too. So here's some best practices. It is going to be in your best interest to provide a complete submission. So any applications with incomplete documentations will be rejected. So you want to make sure that they do have everything in there. So your review process will start when your complete documentation is provided. So that could delay receiving award.
Irene, we've got a question on that.
Absolutely.
So even if I submit tax returns and the IRS form 4506T, I also need to submit the 3 most current bank statements.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Okay, so leverage your resources. So it's not required that you use the CPAs or other accounting professionals, but they could also ensure that you've got a complete and well-documented application. So that shouldn't require additional time on their side, because this process actually is meant to be pretty streamlined. And if you have a POS, that would be your best source to start with, and then go from there with regards to the online application. So SBA is not going to make any corrections on behalf of an applicant who maybe had an error on the application. And so what's going to happen is you'll need to contact the help desk and let them know what occurred. If during the process SBA finds something, we will send it back to you. But then what that does is it delays the application and you don't keep your spot in line. So you really, really need to take some extra steps to make sure, which is why we're doing these now, so you have time to pull it all together. And then if you still intend to apply for PPP, which is still available through the end of next month, then we're advising applicants to complete their PPP application in advance of the RRF so that that amount can be taken out of the funding request. Okay, so when can you apply? So actually this week, we're doing a pilot period. And what we've done is we've randomly selected from existing PPP borrowers who self-identified as members of the RRF priority groups. They're not going to get funding right now. We're just making sure that the portal and the application works. And then, so starting, and I actually just saw some articles that are showing April 30th is when businesses can apply, but then May 3rd is when the applications will be processed. So definitely gather your documentations, because I see that the website now has user ID and password, and I'm sure that we'll be getting notice just like quick that Friday may be a date that could happen. So the priority period is going to be 1 through 21. So for 3 weeks, the only applications that are going to actually be processed are for businesses that are owned by women, veterans, and socially and economically disadvantaged individual applicants. So they'll be funded first. And then after that, day 22, then all the other applications will be processed until the money's been exhausted. And so what this is going to also show Congress is that we need more funds, because we have a lot more businesses that are impacted, which they definitely know that. But for right now, this is what the has been implemented in the disbursement of the funds. And just to share what these priority groups are and what this means. So a small business is 51% owned and managed the day-to-day operations and controlled by a woman or a veteran or socially and economic disadvantage. And we definitely have descriptions as to what the socially and economic disadvantage means. So you are going to self-certify on the application that you do meet those eligibility requirements. So for example, let's say that there's 5 owners who each own 20% of the business. 2 are veterans, 1 is the social and economically disadvantaged. So SBA will consider that this applicant is at least 51% owned by a priority group. So you can even apply now, even if you aren't in the priority group. It'll just wait in the system in the order that it was received. So when that time frame opens, then the rest of the applications will be processed. So a socially disadvantaged groups, it's those that are presumed to be members of Black, Hispanic, Native American, Asian, and your economical are those that fall within those categories, they are presumed to not have the ability to compete in the free enterprise system, impaired due to diminished capital. So it's already presumed that if you're in those socially disadvantaged groups, that you are automatically economically disadvantaged. So if an entity is reorganizing for purposes of qualification for the priority group, it will be an automatic disqualification for the award. And so Congress actually has set aside certain dollar volumes for different businesses who fall within the receipts. So $5 billion is set aside for applicants with 2019 gross receipts of not more than $500 billion, and $4 billion or 500,000. $4 billion is set aside for applicants with 2019 gross receipts from 500,000 to 1.5 million, and then 500 million set aside for 2019 receipts of not more than 50,000. And so SBA reserves the right to reallocate these funds at the discretion of our administrators. So we're definitely going to see where during this pilot phase, where things look, and then as the applications are going through. So there may be some changes with allocations as the program moves forward. So that is a quick summarization of the RRF.
Irene, we've got a couple of questions.
Let me see, let me do a stop share.
So
Let me turn myself off to it.
all right. So the first question I'm seeing is, has the SBA tested the portal for the expected crush of volume on Friday? And at what time on April 30th will the portal be open?
So that is actually what we're doing this week. So I actually am excited because I'm actually on one of the pods that is working on applications. So, so we'll be able to see how this works out. And that's what we're doing this week is working through all the glitches. And hopefully we haven't seen like a time yet. So as soon as they tell us, okay, whatever date, if in fact it will be Friday, but we've seen articles come out and it's like, oh, great, someone else knew before we did. We will for sure send out a press release or some type of information so that everyone hears it all at the same time. But that's our word for last we heard was Friday. They'll open it up, but they're not going to really start processing until Monday. Okay. So I would encourage folks to start pulling your documents together. Take a look at the application. There is a sample application. Take a look at the documents that are needed and talk to your POS and pull those documents together. Even on the POS's websites that you may use, it could be Square, it could be Toast. There's a couple others that are on here as well that on their website, they'll actually do that for you. They can do that processing.
Great. And then Sarah asked, please confirm which 3 months of bank statements must be submitted with the Calc 1 and 2 application.
Okay, so it is your most or your 3 most recent bank statements. So if you're turning it in April, then I would submit January, February, and March.
And then there's a longer question. So CJ asks, my business partner and I started a food truck in 2020. So we would use calculation 3. We opened, excuse me, we opened but have receipts in excess of eligible expenses because we paid ourselves less than minimum wage, about $4 an hour. Based on the calculation, we would not be getting any funds. Is there any chance we could get the funds?
So you're saying that you've exceeded that amount. And so I would ask CJ to, so we don't take a lot of time, give me a call And then we'll go through and look at anything that is real specific to make sure that it meets his questions that he's looking into.
He said, okay.
Awesome, thanks. And I will put my information into the chat.
Great. Next question. To be clear, this is not a loan, rather it's a type of grant, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, great. And then Joe asks, regarding the integration of the POS vendors, we changed POS providers mid-2020. Will both POS records be tied to my EIN?
Oh, I just read a question on that in our program guide. I believe that one is, let's see. I think you're going to go with your last one that you, let's see. Maybe I can find it really quick without taking up too much time. I believe that you're going to use the last one that you, or the one that you changed to. However, if you go to sba.gov/restaurants, and I'll throw that in here too, there is a Restaurant Revitalization Fund knowledge base, which are basically FAQs. And honestly, if you look through the FAQs, you may find your question in here, because I know that one's in here. And then, like I said, if you're looking through it and can't find it, I will walk you through it too.
Irene, do you have the link to those FAQs right there in front of you?
I do. I'm going to throw them in the chat right now.
Perfect. All right. And then we have another question from Sarah. I will ask as soon as you drop that in the chat. All right, there's that link. Good. Okay, Sarah asks, if any entity has multiple locations, it was understood that Calc 2 could be used for the locations open in 2019, and then Calculation 3 for the more recent locations. Is that correct?
Yeah, so depending on the number of locations you have, then it can vary on which calculation you use. And in fact, there is a question to that in that program guide, which is totally awesome. And so I would encourage everyone, after we're done, go to the link and pull up the program guide, and also the, let's see, it's called the RRF Knowledge Base Support Documentation. Let's see if I can totally separate here, because honestly, I would say maybe not. Any question you have has already been asked as far as the program itself. And then if you can't find it, I know that I've seen that question before. Oh, good. Sarah said the guide was helpful. Awesome. Yeah, it is super helpful. Super helpful. And the guide is very helpful. And like I said, also look at the support, knowledge-based support documentation. Like I said, that's FAQs. And if you have questions that you don't see in the guide or the FAQs, if you go to SBA.gov, oh gosh. Okay, I'm going to throw it here in the chat, but you can send an email to get your question answered if you do not see it in the FAQs, because they honestly are taking all questions and putting them in the FAQs as if people asked the questions and then provided the answer.
All right.
Anything else that I could help with? And like I said, if you have anything specific to your situation, feel free just to give me a call or send me an email and we'll get that answered for you. And then also that support line is also your next best, because there's like 150 that are dedicated to answer questions on the application or your unique situation.
Great.
So yes, absolutely. So like I said, over the next few days, this thing is coming pretty quick. And honestly, the portal that I've seen so far is probably one of the best that I've seen. And it's going to show where you've got like 6 steps, and it's going to show you when you've completed every step and what you have left to do. And all the email will be shown, any correspondence back and forth with SBA and the applicant. Everything is right there. Actually, this thing's pretty smooth.
Great. Well, Irene, does our group have any more questions? If not, we will capture all this, put up the recording on our website, so anybody can revisit this. We should probably have it up by tomorrow. Otherwise, Irene gave her email and phone number, so thank you for that, and thank you for doing this and helping everyone. And we look.
Absolutely, I'm actually super excited about this one.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to help people with restaurants or food and beverage with a lot of needed assistance. And it could, I mean, I think granted, it probably would have been nice to have it sooner, but I think where it is now is certainly going to be helpful.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you. I hope you have a smooth launch this weekend.
Me too. Me too. All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone. And feel free to send questions or give me a call or send an email. But like I said, start first on the website and look at the guide and look at the knowledge-based support documents. Those 2 are actually awesome references.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, Irene, and thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Take care.